All right, traders, welcome to today's recap. This is Christian from Tribeca Trade Group, and it is your end of day and end of week video. What a week it was. Crazy price action, back and forth price action, basically all week long. For the day, the S&P finished up 1.1%. Qs finished up 1.3%. They outperformed. Small caps, monster day, up 1.9%. VIX was down about 7% for the day. And, a really interesting reversal from yesterday. If we kind of go back to rewind and go back to where we finished yesterday, there was really not much of the buy the dip attitude at the end of the day. I did think it was a little bit of a, in hindsight 2020, I did think it was a little bit of an overreaction. But, I said, hey, I'm going to trust the price action and what it's telling me. Maybe the market just was looking for an excuse to sell off. And if there was some other news that could have sold off the market like this. So what I was expecting in the overnight last market, I didn't get. I thought that we would come in and see maybe the S&P up about 0.5%. We came in and the S&P was only up about 10 basis points from where we finished yesterday. We basically flatlined all through the session. One thing that I thought was a bright spot was China was up big last night. So we'll talk about China in just a second. But here was the price action today right from the start. We got going. We made it through value. Hesitated a little bit here. We took out that level that we talked about yesterday, which was VPOC that basically stopped us in the tracks. And then we grinded higher for the rest of the session. Very impressive price action. A little bit of a give back there at the end of the day. We did hear about, you hear this stuff on Twitter all the time because people like to know if there's an MOC to buy or to sell. There was an MOC, $2 billion to buy. However, remember in trading, not everybody puts those orders down for the close. MOC is market on close, right? You have to give the exchange the order. If I think NYSE ARCA is still 340, right? That you need to submit your order by to guarantee the closing print. NASDAQ is 350, right? So we usually get that number around 350, but there could be a lot of other trading besides people who are putting down straight those orders for MOC. I can tell you as an institutional trader, I used to do quite a bit of end-of-day MOC trading, and I would never put my whole order down for the close unless it was really tiny and I didn't have any edge trading it. But I would always trade more of the order going into the close versus actually just putting the order down to the giving it to the exchange, right? So that's why be careful with that. When you see that on Twitter that there's a big sell or big buy imbalance, it doesn't always work that way where the market continues to ramp because it's not the whole picture. All right, guys. So that's that. I just wanted to review that. If we look at the 1 hour chart, you can see that basically we went flat for the week. Right, but big swings intraday, crazy swings intraday. Really good if you love to scalp and day trade. You certainly got your opportunities, but we did not make a closing high. We made an intraday new high, but yeah, you could see how big and fat these candles are. Right, much harder for a day trader to operate when the candles are very narrow. But, look at the difference, right, in the price action that we're getting. So, we'll just kind of have to stay tuned till next week. We've got a huge week of earnings next week. I think it's very constructive that we held here to the, to basically go back and forth like this and hold all the short-term moving averages. The other thing that I made note of this morning for members is this 200 period moving average on the 1 hour chart. It's important for me because I get to see the short-term trend. Right, and that the short-term trend does provide and help me with some clues for the market. Now the price action got above the short-term trend, 200 period moving average at the end of March. Since then, we've been above it. This week was different. It was the first week that we violated this, right? And we definitely went back and forth under and then over again. So for now, I'm not going to read too much more into this price action because we've got a lot of events next week. For now, it's constructive that we ended above the line, right? That's, again, above the line, uptrend, short-term uptrend. Below the line, short-term downtrend. That's all we can really say right now. And I'm not going to speculate on what's to come for next week. I think you kind of have to take this price action. We know that these end of the months are tricky. So take it for what it is. They're tricky. You should be prepared every day when you're thinking about your trading plan. You should be thinking about various different factors. One of them for me is that the end of the months are tricky, okay? And we've seen that now for multiple months. Again, it's no guarantee of what's going to happen, but do I think if I were to speculate and say, do I think next week's going to be tricky? I would say yes. We've got all these earnings, all the big heavy hitters report next week. And what else? Do we have a Fed meeting next week too? What's up? Well, we'll see what's on the calendar here. Yeah, we have a Fed meeting next week. So it's going to be a very busy week next week, all right, to say the least. Okay, so yes, I'm throwing that out there. I'm making a huge call. It's going to be tricky next week. All right, so I always like to review the performance once we get to the end of the week. Here's what I was referring to: S&P flat for the week, despite that back and forth price action. The small caps did actually outperform. Right, I saw a lot of people talking about possible head and shoulders patterns forming. Again, the pattern isn't a pattern until it is a pattern. Right, you could speculate, but this does not look like a head and shoulders anymore. Doesn't mean that we can't go down, but right shoulder, head, that's not a right shoulder anymore, right? And what I referred to the other day is it's not a pattern until you break the neckline, right? So it is what it is. Right now we're inside value, so you really can't draw too many conclusions from being inside value, except sideways. Right, you could start to look at next month's, which I've been doing this in a few different charts. Right, you could start to look at next month's value area. You could see it's pretty tight so far. Why is that? Because look at the volume profile, which I have turned on the MarketWebs indicator. Right, but you could see how condensed this market profile is. So I think next month, I think IWM may begin to kind of move decently. Provided that this value area stays thin. Okay. Qs, which underperformed slightly for the week, but really the trend is intact here. So again, maybe earnings or the Fed meeting gets us to kind of may change the tone, but for now, uptrend. Performers besides that, a little bit different than last week. I always keep last week's performance in here, so you could see right up here, everything was up between like 1% to 2% last week. Gold, bonds, all equities, international equities too. This week was different. Right, here's the performance again for this week. Right, in terms of sectors, you had a big week for solar, believe it or not. Right, and the Chinese internets. We'll talk about them in just a second. Clean energy, REITs, healthcare were strong. Transports were strong. Biotech actually showed up a little bit this week. They finished positively for the week. Interesting, the cryptos blockchain space was down 7% for the week, although they rallied pretty hard. So they were down over 10% coming into today. Solar, very interesting. I posted a few charts on Twitter. I think this was Wednesday night, and I was talking about how the solar group was looking kind of interesting. I tweeted out DQ, which by the way hit our price target. Right, so this is probably one of the most volatile names in solar. It's a China solar name, but man, can this thing move? But yeah, this was the upside target that I mentioned on Twitter. It hit this. I did sell my position yesterday. I thought it was close enough. I was happy with the trade, so I sold it yesterday. But look at that. Did get to that VPOC target, right? Which was off of this time period here. So, but yeah, I mean, let's talk about how, this market sometimes it's very much based on market philosophy, right? A little bit of and behaviors, right? They call it behavioral science. So for instance, and Twitter is a funny place. It's a funny platform, but someone made a comment to me, and I'm not calling this person out, but I think it's just a good example of how it works sometimes. They told me, because I haven't been looking at the solar names for the last couple months. There's been better places to be, but I always stay objective to what the charts are telling me. So I tweeted out a couple solar charts. First time I've done that in months. Somebody says, solar was last year. I'm like, okay, you're right. Solar had it, it was a big year for solar. But the fact that once you get people who just are like, that's it, like I'm not even going to look at this group anymore. It's over. That's sometimes when things rebound, right? So the market is always about psychology, and one of the things that I thought was a really interesting tell, or you could have used as a contrarian signal, was this ARK ETF, ARK Innovation, saw $800 million of outflows this week, right? So what do some people do on Twitter, right? Instead of using this information and trying to use it to help you, people are defensive. Oh, well, people who sold, you have to look at all the other inflows, average it together. You're not looking at the data right. These were some of the responses that I got on Twitter. Oh, well, look at what every other time, it's gotten outflows. So this was kind of interesting. So how I used this and how I thought about this, right? And here's my post that I tweeted the other day, which you could see the weekly inflows and outflows. It kind of shook out some weak hands, right? All these people that were so passionate and instead of being disciplined, sorry to say, were so passionate about this and the fund and ignored rules and really got caught up in this kind of stuff, right? Some of them got washed out, right? And a pretty decent washout. This is the third biggest week of outflows, weekly outflows that the fund has ever seen. So yes, that's when some things will bounce, right? Again, from a contrarian standpoint, you start to see weak hands like that, take their losses and get out. It's sometimes when things rebound, all right? So that's the way you kind of use the flow data. You don't argue with it. So anyway, like I said, Twitter always is an interesting platform. All right, so I think we talked about a lot of the performance, but yeah, we hit a really nice performance in this. Another area that was very beaten up was the Chinese internet names, and you heard me on Bloomberg yesterday talk about them, and this trade worked very well. Right, and I have that Bloomberg clip, but we talked about how this got back to the 200-day moving average. My trade ID on Bloomberg was May calls. I actually took that trade, right? So you could go in and you could see my trades from yesterday. I got out of this mostly for 240. I'm still in the last piece of it because I'm trying to hold out a winner on it. All right. So, but a nice overnight move that I got, right, from China being up overnight. All right. So a couple. Let's go back to here for a second, right? And the performance, I think we went over the index performance, right? And here's what really rallied. The blockchain stocks were not up 4%. They rallied from the lows pretty decently, off 4%. So pretty big intraday reversal there. The banks were strong today, up about 4%. So again, you had some strong breadth. You could see that on the bottom left of my screen, right? I always like to give the raw numbers in there too. Oops. All right, so here's the raw numbers. S&P had 400 advancing names, 98 declining, and NASDAQ 2169 versus 742. So finally, right, a couple days this week we saw strong breadth, right? Obviously yesterday was a whipsaw day, but on Wednesday we also saw that strong breadth too. All right, so some of the trades that I mentioned, we'll kind of wrap up the week here, but had some nice trades. I talked about this a little bit. I was on Benzinga earlier today, and I talked about how some names on earnings gave some opportunities. Sometimes they sell off on they kind of just are a little bit too dramatic. I thought FCX was one of those names, sold off on earnings, and if you look at what copper's doing. Copper's breaking higher. So, yeah, I'll take that opportunity. You give me an opportunity where I see copper going higher and FCX is down. So, I added to my FCX position that I did actually hold through earnings. Baba, I actually got out of Baba and just wanted to do some other things in China. I put on a Baidu call spread for next week. Short-term trade, so using a call spread for that, so the premium outlay isn't that expensive. ALB was a nice trade. We talked about that, I think, in yesterday's video. They actually had an announcement, so always smart to have an order out there. I managed to get a target at 166. Overall, the chart looks pretty good. So, I'm not gonna go over too many charts here, but I mean, a lot of very constructive looking setups for next week. So even though I think next week is going to be tricky, some interesting stuff out there. All right, take a look at the at this keys. Right, a lot of I love names that consolidate like this and then push higher. Right, look at the steel names as well. STLD is leaning higher out of all that consolidation in an uptrend. Right? Notice how it let the moving average, 20-day moving average, kind of catch up with the price action. Now it looks like it could go. I like this setup for next week. All right, and a couple other names. I got back into SE today. It's a name that I've been stalking. Closed on the highs, so that looks pretty good. We'll see if this thing can actually push and come out here. So that's kind of what I'm looking at for some names. It's always difficult, to balance. I think it's one of the hardest things to do in trading, with your trading account versus your long-term account, is balancing, how many positions that you're going to hold and manage. Right? Because we all know when we do get a swoosh down like we saw yesterday, it hurts a little bit more if you've got a lot of exposure on, right? So you kind of have to take. I always start with the macro. Like for instance, next week we've got a Fed meeting and we've got all these earnings reports, and then I kind of drill into the individual names and the groups and the sectors and so on and so forth. So, I think you have to kind of I use both, right? And I really am tactical with that kind of stuff. Autodesk, we talked about how we saw a whole bunch of calls go up. I think it was for June. I got out of. So how I kind of maneuver with this sometimes with options, and this is just a little bit of a technique that I learned over the last couple of years. Is the options are really going to move. So if I get a really nice move, right, I'm taking targets. I got out of this position for 1830, right? And then what I did is I bought a little stock, right? Then I can kind of weather the bumps in the road a little bit more with the stock position versus an option position. Because if you look at where this thing rallied to for the day, it rallied right into the bottom of value, right? So I thought, I unwound that position at this green candle. Because I thought we were going to hit a little bit of short-term resistance, which we did. So I put on a little bit of stock position. If this thing happens to kind of settle back in a little bit, then I can add to the stock position. All right. I've learned just that my mentality, I'm a lot more comfortable taking the profits in the option, even if it's one-day trade, beautiful, and then I can really kind of manage the stock position a little bit better. All right, but everybody's different, right? Everybody's different. There's more than one way to make money in the market. All right, guys. So I'll leave it there. But like I said, plenty of good-looking setups again for next week, and you kind of just it's tough because you can't take all the trades, right? So that was a really tough thing for me. Coming to the end of the day, I was like, wow, we're seeing so many good-looking setups for next week, but maybe they'll give me an opportunity if we get a little bit of down movement on Monday to get in some of those names. All right, guys, have a great night. Have a great weekend, and I'll see you on Monday.